Hi, I'm Sarah Pearson, and welcome to the Uncomfortable Conversation podcast, where we talk about all of the uncomfortable things that help us prevent and respond to sexual violence. I am very excited to be here today with Craig, who, like me, wears many hats. Craig, welcome to the Uncomfortable Conversation.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm glad that you were able to join us today. So why don't we start with the different kinds of hats that you didn't wear a hat today, but but let's talk about some of the hats that you do wear in your life that you might bring into this conversation.
Sure. I'd start by saying that my own family history brings a lot of that to bear. I'm the oldest of four boys, grew up in the housing projects of Jamaica Plain, Boston. My stepdad was someone who was addicted and filled with rage, and the violence that manifested in my upbringing was a significant part of that. I am a nurse, an athletic trainer in sports medicine, a strength and conditioning coach, massage therapist.
Wait, hold on. So let's go back. So you're a
Uh-huh.
nurse?
Yes.
Okay. So what kind of nursing have you?
I had been a cardiac intensive care nurse at Boston Medical Center, first Boston City Hospital, and done many other kinds of nursing over the time. Um, I, as I said, also think about health protection and promotion through strength and conditioning,
Yeah.
massage therapy,
Okay.
long distance running, um, and
So you
uh,
both participated and
and had
also
a micro business that did all those things together.
so I do want to just pause and go back. So thank you for opening with your personal story. And I think there are far too many of us that have experienced that kind of both physical and emotional violence because it's you can't really separate the two, especially when you're such a small person needing protection and love in the world. So
It's defining in all kinds of ways. And I think in large part because of who my mother was and how she was able to persist in that, really did allow for me and my three brothers to be better men in all kinds of different ways, recognizing that we witnessed those kinds of hierarchies and domination and marginalizing and repeated events that imparted on us how we need a different path with relationships of all kinds.
that resonates with me as well. I mean, I think one of the things that has been a theme for me around my own healing is there's a break in trust, there's a break in the belief that the world can be good, and then there's a healing from that. And sort of what that healing looks like is it really, at least for me, has I think started to take on new dimensions as I become older and look back and realize what my perspective was as a child and what a perspective as a child ought to be versus what my perspective is as an adult now. And so I think it's this sort of that where the helpers show up can really make a difference, whether that's in that immediate term or in the long term, or how we can now do that hopefully for other people too.
Yeah, I was the oldest brother, and in a sense was parenting my mother as we were growing up and supporting my other brothers in ways that allowed us to find the balance in the midst of the chaos.
And how old were you when you say I was an older brother in the midst of the chaos? How old were you?
Mm. In that household in the Jamaica Plain projects of Bromley Heath from I was from 7 to 9.
So when you say I was taking responsibility for my younger brothers, you're saying that with the hat of a 9-year old.
Well, again, a lot of all of our childhood was taken away in the midst of that. As strong as my mother was, um, the difficulty with her own mental health challenges allowed us to understand that there were times where we really needed to care for her.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a collective process of how we would step forward and step back to support her and to support each other and to honestly manufacture joy in a way that allowed us to um, gain a resilience and a and a gumption that kind of exists to this day.
Oh, that's interesting. So when you said manufacture joy, sort of what came up for me is in my family experience, there was just a deep sense of denial that
Mm.
anything was wrong, right? And that it was the we're going to show up as a happy family even though all of these dark things are happening under the surface. And that was a negative thing for me, but it sounds like for you is that that was to some extent an opportunity for you to really create that joy.
The 4 of us were class clowns. We loved to laugh, we loved to make each other laugh. We had a game where we would try to make my mother laugh to the point which she would pee herself.
Oh, that's always a fun
And
game.
so, we high five each other in all kinds of different ways to kind of say, "Ah, we got her!" It's like so. In the midst of all of the stuff that we were dealing with, we would laugh a lot, and that was a medicine in a way that didn't cost a thing.
That's been an observation. I forget what I was listening to. I've been thinking a lot about humor lately, and I heard a quote that really resonated with me as well, that it's humor, particularly dark humor, is the ultimate control lever, because we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it. And so, and I think about I think about some of the gender differences as well, is that there is more of an acceptance of humor and banter and joking around and being a class clown if you are male than if you are female. And sort of how that sense of humor around being a sexual violence survivor. There's not a lot of good content on that, right?
It's tough
And right,
material.
it's tough material, but it's also like that's part of what makes you feel so alone, right? Is that it's like if I can't laugh about the absurdity of all of this or make a dark joke about it, then I'm sort of stuck with all of the darkness by myself. It's like I think humor is a way to connect with each other,
Absolutely.
and sometimes it's more effective than just sitting there talking about all my bad feelings, which is very acceptable for women to do with each other.
There's a broad spectrum of how boys and young men are raised versus girls and young women, right? That's another
No,
podcast in itself.
it could be a whole other conversation. So you had a childhood experience that had both joy and violence. You then became a nurse in a cardiac unit, which I would also imagine had joy and violence in different ways. And then where did your sort of what are the other hats that I know you work in academia now, so you also have an academic hat to you as well.
Yeah. So I'd also share the massage therapy, the strength and conditioning, the sports medicine, and I say those in particular because of the kinesthetic element that I think unconsciously perhaps I found ways to daily heal in broad spectrums of exercise and understanding how my own body works, including my mind, and the communication of touch. Massage therapy has a element that helps us understand the energy, the language of our own body, and how touching can be obviously traumatic as well as a gift in terms of care and recovery and um, understanding in a way that doesn't even need words. So that has long been
A,
a safe or
a
brave
thread
space
for
for
you.
myself in a way that allowed me to learn how to touch with a level of care and kindness as opposed to what I witnessed on an ongoing basis.
We had talked about just trust as that core theme, and I think particularly when you have experienced some kind of intimate violence, so whether that is sexual violence or domestic violence in the context of your family setting as a child, when your trauma happens in a relationship, right, is that your whole foundation of trust is broken. And so all that you want, at least in my experience, is like all that I want is to be able to feel that intimate connection with people, and that is also the sort of scariest place and most vulnerable place to be. And so that's that yeah, that both that journey around healing and resilience happens with your emotions and your mind and your body. And I'm very curious, just so for me, it's only been more recently that I feel like I've been able to get to some of the body perspective and body healing, it was sort of safer to just be outside of my body. And there is still a lot of work you can do on your mind and your emotions and all of that, which is absolutely also valid. But it sounds like your journey started with your body.
To a degree, yeah. I mean, even in my training for massage therapy, which was a 3-year program, I I went through and at the recommendation of the director of the massage school to get Jungian therapy, which
For people that don't know what Jungian therapy is.
well, in part, there's a body work part of it that actually unlocks the emotions that are trapped. I was carrying a lot of anger and a significant amount of fear. And there's times that I still remember the sobbing in therapy of that floodgates open and being able to let and release that tension that has been welled up since 7 years old, and what that how that changed my own practice of massage and being able to touch someone with an intentionality that was deliberately understood why I was doing it and why I was being therapeutic as opposed to anything else. In a school that was deliberately recognizing that massage had a long history of doing different things that were untoward in all kinds of ways. How do we find ways to bring a honest, caring, deliberate, safe, repeatedly safe way of managing that kind of intimate touching? And intimacy in general is a critical element that we've challenged and undone in all kinds of ways. Intimacy isn't just about sex or any of that, but how can we be in partnership with anyone in more than a superficial way without really understanding where you begin and something else starts.
Right. So it's
And
like
ends.
it's
Yeah,
the sort of how does intimacy flow
that's
through?
right. Yeah. And how can we be more connected with people in true um, really joyous ways, unless we're able to understand the layers of those things.
I'm sure you must have met some. It sounds like you've had done some client work both with the strength and conditioning as well as with massage therapy. I'm wondering if you can think of a time where you sort of were able to find that kind of intimacy and sit in a safe way with a client. If you can, is there a story that you can share?
Well, I mean, I think it's an amalgam of many. That practice really does make near perfect in all kinds of ways. The consistent understanding of the energy that different individuals have. Now I can walk into a room and feel a negative energy and understand it in a way that is unique. And to be able to lay a hand on someone's shoulder or their low back and see where attention is in a
Mm-hmm.
way that is physical, but also something else,
Mm-hmm.
could be emotional and
Mm-hmm.
and in a sense historical.
Yeah.
and
So what
and
does that look like for me, right? So like I'm gonna go get a massage. So I'm trying to imagine
Sure.
sort of people that are less experienced doing body work. And I think I'm sure you and I have both met both men and women who carry a lot and that they might not have the same language or experience. And so I'm wondering if they might hear this conversation and be like, well, the last thing I'm doing is going to go to get a massage right now. That sounds terrifying. So I'm curious, like if you break it down, right? So you're going to walk, if you found, how would you find a massage therapist that would be like a trauma informed? Let's just sort of,
Yeah.
so like, because what
No,
you're
I mean,
describing is being trauma informed.
yeah, I think it
So like,
is.
how would I know that you were trauma informed if we had never met before?
More often than not, people will advertise that in a deliberate way, recognizing that there is the broad
Yeah.
spectrum of that. And to be honest, in some traditions, that isn't even part of their language, but it is. But also there is this awareness of the history in people's bodies and how you respect that. You don't unlock that without permission. You don't. All those kinds of things are a
Yeah.
partnership, and I think
So I
more
come
often
in
than
for my
not,
first massage, and then what do you say?
I
I'm
would
like,
talk about
"Hi,
my
Craig.
own
Hi,
practice.
Craig. I'm here for my massage."
And I would say, "Hi, Sarah. We it's a pleasure to meet you. I look forward to working with you. I want to let you know that massage is one of those things that every once in a while you could be surprised because something that happened for you a while ago has been locked in this area of your
Mhm.
body. And just by trying to manage and work the tension out, we may move things in ways that are
Yep.
surprising to you. And you may have emotions come up. I may not see them, but you may feel them. And
Right.
that is something for you to understand. Feel free to say something if you want to, but not if you
If
also
you don't
don't
want
want
to,
to.
it's like, but
That's
it's
right.
normal. So
It is absolutely normal, and know that these things can happen. And to a degree, we can work with that on an ongoing basis to support you in all kinds of ways.
right. Well, I mean, I love what you say there too, which is that you can talk about it, but you don't have to, right? Because I think sometimes we get caught in a feeling comes up and I need to somehow make sense of it with my words or my mind.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And I have particularly found that, the particularly the deeper trauma work is that it's about those little connections, right? And so it's kind of how things connect from today back to something that was an original hurt or original tangle. My therapist talks about it as a tangle. So it's like something might get untangled for you in this session when we work on this particular part of your body. And it might make sense to you today, it might make sense to you 5 years from now. That's okay. You can talk about it with me, but you don't have to. And
Yeah.
so I do think it's that like normalizing. No, that's helpful, just sort of thinking about what that looks like. And has that come up for you in the strength and conditioning world as well?
Again, I'm encouraging people to be in their body in terms of building strength, flexibility, functionality, finding ways to understand and be in your body as you're moving and doing any number of exercises. Here again, I may guide someone with a gentle um, positioning so
Yep.
that they can better understand what the movement is supposed to do, and they feel that and they recognize then how to repeat that on a regular basis. And at the same time, it may trigger memories
Mhm.
in any number of ways. Even just the hand on the shoulder or the back
Yep.
could do that. And I am and when people work with me, they recognize, because of my explanation of how I see and work with the body, that they can bring that forward as they see fit, because they know that there is a potential for that. And so recognizing that we can completely be out of our body for a good amount of our life, never mind a day or a moment, and being able to connect that, and connect the fullness of our body and our mind, to a degree, I'd say spirit as well, that can be an asset that people can
Yep.
bring into their life in all kinds of ways.
When did you first learn or discover that exercise was a way for you to be in your body? Was that just something that was always a part? I mean, it sounds
Yeah.
like you had brothers and there was a lot of running around, but
Well,
sort of.
early in my life, I started running, and it
Mhm.
became this mental health practice.
Mhm.
It was the thing that grounded me and helped me reset after emotional moments, to the point where throughout my long, rich marriage, my wife would say, "It's probably time for a run."
Yes. Yes. It's good when other people are telling you that it's a
You
good
should go
idea.
for a run.
We did. So with the uncomfortable conversation, we actually did a whole series of videos
Mm,
about um, conversations related to consent, supporting survivors, bystander intervention in a gym and fitness setting, which was really fun. And one of the things that I learned through that process is that there really isn't, for as much physicality, like we know that there's an intersection between the body and the mind. We know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men experience sexual violence in their lifetime, but you have so many fitness coaches who are going blind into group sessions or private sessions without any of that same awareness. And so that's part of the reason that I think it's been helpful to talk about it a little bit more, which is kind of both around the touch. The thing that's been coming up for me lately is that, in my own PTSD recovery, is I've been really interested in my adrenal system and kind of what fight or flight, there's sort of fight or flight. And then in my experience, it was just freeze. And so how I can break myself out of that. And there's a pattern that keeps showing up in my fitness, which is my heart rate gets to a certain level. where like you should get a surge of adrenaline to sort of push you through, I get a panic attack instead. And so I've been thinking about what can I say to myself in those moments, or how can I invite a coach in to those, like how I guess, or how can I signal that like I need a different track in my, so I'm really curious sort of if you and I were working together kind of in that like what are some ideas that you would have of sort of like things that you would say, or what I would say to myself. I'm super curious.
Yeah, and I would say, that I, as part of my own identity and my journey, I've had a long history of depression, and have come to a point through counseling and medication, been able to manage that and acknowledge that there are times where I notice in my body I'm feeling something in my chest, or in my hands are clenching unbeknownst to me, unless someone said that to me, or my jaw hurts because of the feeling that I'm having that's manifesting physically. To allow people to practice on listening to what their body is telling them. The nauseousness that may come on all of a sudden because of something, some words, some touch, some movement that somehow connects to something that they still take, it could take years to uncover. And I want to be clear, and all of my practices, whether it be massage, strength and conditioning, or public health or nursing, um, I'm not the therapist. I am just kind of guiding people and facilitating in all kinds of ways and helping them find their spaces they are ready for and how they do that. And acknowledging in the midst of this that this our body is complicated and amazing in all kinds of ways.
Right. So some of the doors we've talked to, so we've talked about massage therapy, we've talked about exercise. Let's talk a little bit about feelings. So we skipped the feelings, went straight to the body, knowing that the body holds the feelings. But I think we had talked a little bit about the ways in which men and women are socialized to both experience and express feelings differently, and that, for men it is safe for to be angry, and for women it's less safe to be angry, and more acceptable to be anxious perhaps, right? And so sort of thinking about how you open your aperture from wherever you are. So, depending on kind of whatever feeling, yeah, all of the feelings should be available to you in your toolbox, and that feelings are information and tell you things about yourself, your body, and how you want to show up. So, I'm curious, kind of some of the ways for for you, how sort of it's what you did with your anger, how you say you mentioned depression, which is sometimes it's anger turns inward, sometimes it's sadness that's not being expressed, and so sort of how have you made sense of some of those
Yeah,
things?
I bring up one that you and I talked about earlier, the Healthy Men and Boys program that I was part of in Western Mass. Where we worked with a broad spectrum of counselors that brought men and boys together, as well as women across gender identity and sexual orientation, to work in groups to understand the socialization of men and boys in particular, and how um, anger and extreme sadness were safe, but everything else in the emotional vocabulary was a vulnerability that men weren't able to tolerate. The idea that you could ask any boy, when was the first time you were told you can't, boys don't cry? And that
Everyone has a story.
everybody has a story.
Right, yeah.
And it is not unusual for parents to say that out loud, boys don't cry. And where girls and women are encouraged to be in touch with those feelings in a very different
Yep.
way. And that manifests in our education and all these kinds of things. And so that was a really interesting and helpful multiple conversations over years that worked deliberately to change that model within society locally, for the sake of safety of family and
Mhm.
women in general, recognizing that poor socialization, that inability to have a full emotional vocabulary to kind of share your feelings of frustration and sadness and loneliness and all of those things, can not only make men and boys more healthy and able to be more full selves in their environment, but made it safe for women to have less battering, less violence, more intimacy, more partnership in all kinds of
One
meaningful
also
ways.
reduces one thing that you had shared with me that I thought was also just worth noting is one of your early therapists was male. And you think about the role of women, whether as educators, as therapists, as, sort of helpers and caretakers, is that there's a societal reliance on women to make sense of emotions and to give emotions language and to sort of be there to process the emotions. And so, and I think it's, similarly, it's like there are men that, sort of men take on the role of being physical and doing the physical things and holding the physical labor, and so, and it's like, how do we share that in a more healthy way? And so I think one last topic I think would be great for us to just touch on. So I think we've talked about, we both had had experiences of intimate violence in our childhoods. We look different. We've lived very different lives in
I
terms.
thought we were kind of
I thought we were
twin-like.
kind of twin-like. I mean,
I kind of my hair
exactly.
and
But just sort of thinking about so many of those themes, right? Which is that, the work that we've done on our emotions, the work that we've done with our bodies in very different ways, and to some extent with very different languages. I'm saying assault bike, you're saying union massage therapy. And so we're just breaking all the stereotypes here. but I'm curious, the just, the some of the other tools that are in your toolbox. You have talked about your spiritual grounding, and what that looks like and how that shows up for you. So I'm wondering if you sort of share a little bit kind of briefly about kind of how do you define your spirituality and how does that show up for you? And how, because again, some of these are very big questions, which is like, how is there good and evil in this, in the world? Like, how can I live in a family where one person is violent to me and another one loves me and brings me joy? Like, it's like these are sort of very just kind of human condition, existential types of questions. And so, would love to hear a little bit about your spiritual lens on that.
yeah, I would say first that I gratefully was raised by a strong um, woman, my mother, who, in the midst of her own trauma, mental health struggles, was able to help me and my brothers gain that emotional vocabulary in a way and not be so pent up with the not, don't cry and all those kinds of things. And I also was mentored by four gay men who, as friends, some closeted, others out, were able to kind of take me under their wing and model a fuller emotional vocabulary that included joy and sadness and kind of all the things in between in full ways that bring in their queerness femininity and the masculinity that are part of all of us in all kinds of different ways. I in my long love of reading, discovered as and was exploring um, religious practices and discovered Buddhism as I was distance running and becoming a vegan because I wanted to perform more effectively in my marathoning. And in the nexus of having a counselor who was a famous Buddhist teacher, Jewish man that had gone to China and brought all that back and into his own Harvard psychological practice, that helped me learn my own Buddhist practice of meditation and be able to bring a spiritual focus to it that allowed myself to be present in a moment in time and also have conversations with all the parts of who I am as if I was in an orchestra and trying to control the Hulk beast that I was afraid of unleashing and harming my wife or my children or all those kinds of things, and be able to, in session, have the conversation of those parts of me and
We talked about
gain
this
that.
was internal family systems
Yeah,
therapy, which I
yeah,
also have participated in, which is sort of like helping to kind of make sense of the ways that your different parts of yourself show up to protect you, to be whole, to navigate parts of the life that are hard. And so getting them to all work together as a team.
And I think for me, Buddhism has that spirituality, but also has a practicality to it that
Hmm.
just I can sit, talk to someone, and just put my hands in a position like this, and I'm already linked into just staying
Hmm.
right here.
Hmm.
And that has served me in all kinds of different ways, in particular of listening actively and being able to hear what people are saying and not mansplain in a way that all of a sudden undoes the relationship, but just be in partnership and let a conversation go without bringing my ego forward.
Yep. No, I think that those tools that we learn about, it's like there's, our society in particular, I think, doesn't have a name for them, right? But it's like there are spiritual tools, which is different than religion, right? But it's like, I think any religion has a set of tools that are about how do you show up in a way that is more about more than yourself? How do you put your ego aside and be something greater? How do you trust in relationships and in the universe to sort of move in the right direction, and how do we kind of have some space for grace with ourselves and each other when things don't always go as we would like them to be, because we are, after all, human, and that is a condition of challenge at times.
Great grace is a magic word. I really do think it is. It goes a lot. Oh, that's wonderful. I think I have space.
Yeah.
Um, the those values. I mean, grace, compassion, empathy, love. We don't say or practice love as fully as we could, right? There's a radicalness to it that we should be sharing in a much more generous way.
Yep. I mean, love
Generosity
is
is
like
another
love is
one.
a practice, right? And
That's
so
right.
I think it's, we
That's
make decisions every day. And for me is the uncomfortable conversation, is it is a practice of building empathy, about building connection, of building intimacy, about creating spaces with people, and, sort of finding your way in. Because I think there's also just something about kind of how do we help people bring the walls down so that we can talk about what really matters and that the things that will make the world a better place. So
absolutely.
I'm really good. Thank you so much, Craig, for being here today with the uncomfortable conversation. So
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a rich conversation. We've covered a lot of ground.
indeed, and there's more ground that we could have covered,
That's
but
right.
here we are. So, and thank all of you for joining us today too. Hopefully that there was something in our conversation that you picked up and can talk about with somebody in your life. That's what the Uncomfortable Conversation podcast is all about. So if you liked what you heard today, make sure you also like us on YouTube and Instagram.